All right, friends, welcome back again to another episode of Tactical Enlightenment. Our YouTube channel is dedicated to all things Bannerlord related, and we continue to explore the very best troops in Bannerlord. We are focused on infantry. In yesterday's episode, we were focused on the kingdom troops. Today, we are looking for the best champions, the best individual foot troops in all the land. Now, who's it going to be? Is it going to be the Nord huscarl? Is it going to be the Imperial legionary? We shall see. We're going to work from 7 to number 1, and this is the result of thousands of hours of gameplay and dozens of hours of testing in the last week. We'll start off with number 7. I hate to disappoint the Imperial fans, but the Imperial legionary comes in at number 7. Now we're going to give a few examples for every single one of these. Some of them will give extensive examples, and I'll talk about some of their strengths and weaknesses. In most cases, these units all have strengths. These are the very best infantry in the game. Now the legionary do have the ability now to throw their pylum, but it's sort of window dressing. Where they really make their hay is with their very fast mace and their sword, and particularly their mace. Their mace is extremely fast, and that gives them a big advantage over other infantry. Essentially, they gain the initiative. If they're both swinging at the same time, the legionary come out on top. Plus, maces do extra damage to higher level units. And here, the sturgeon beat down continues. You're going to see some of the same units used again and again in our tests that were pitting as the enemies of these champions, and that is because they do not fit into the top 7 overall. Surprise, surprise, there are no sturgeon infantry in the top 7. Now, some people might say dismounted Drudzinnik, should be in the top 7. For the record, the list is free of mounted units. Now, I may put in a few at the end because it is true. A dismounted Drudzinnik is better than a legionary and does major work. But this list is comprised entirely of infantry. There won't be any Consguards wailing up and down with their glaives, just for the clarification. In case someone's waiting for the Fiend Champs to be number 3 or something like that. They will be mentioned at the end if I have time, but they're not obviously infantry. All right, we charge here again, and I'm going to do very subtle micromanagement. We're not going to do extensive tactics with the square over here. I just want to make sure that the battles are relatively even and units aren't standing around. In fact, I want to test the legionary against cavalry, which reminds me to bring up another point. I have considered a variety of different things with this rankings, and of course it's simply one dude's opinion. Now, I do have 17,000 hours of Bannerlord according to my Steam console, so take it for what it's worth. I play Bannerlord an awful lot. In fact, I'm recording this at work. But also, we're considering this, right? Cavalry clearly are an advantage against some shock troops. I think the legionary, this is probably their strongest point, right? They will absolutely brawl against cavalry because they have the pylum. They will throw a pylum, and they will also hold on to the secondary spear for cavalry. So we're also going to do some very, very basic formations. In this example here, we're going to form a classic defensive ring. When you have a bunch of infantry and you're getting charged by cavalry, either multiple squares or my preference, especially against a lot of cavalry, would be this kind of a ring. They throw their pylums and every single guy is facing outward with his spear, meaning it's very difficult for the cavalry to really do damage to the guys on the outside of this circle. And the infantry's on the other side, so in a way this is a bit of a hammer and anvil, and I don't think it's going to matter. We shall see. They got a few kills there. Now we'll charge with the legionary. Now that the units are all tied up there, they should do really nice work on the cavalry, and we'll play this out. Some of these we're going to do heavy editing. This is just going to be the first of several. I've already pre-made my list. You won't be surprised. I've done many hours of testing, and I've changed the position of some of the units over the course of that testing. I've had my eyes opened by various different testing, and speaking of eye-opening, you would have to say this is eye-opening here. Coming in at number 7, and we'll just list the strengths very briefly. Very strong armor, very quick attack speed, and we will say excellent all-around troops. The Imperial legionary comes in at number 7. You want these bloody guys on your side. That guy looks great. All right, coming in at number 6 on the list is the Nord Shield Companion. Now, this is their Tier 5 Noble unit, and they are simply outstanding. You could tell from the stats, these are better than Legionary. All the stats are better. In fact, every single one of those, when you go to a Legionary, these are better, and that is reflected on the battlefield. Now, this Nord Shield Companion in some of our tests was more powerful than the huscarl. We will talk about that more later, but this is a very, very versatile unit, and that counts for something in these tests. This unit has it all. They have outstanding armor. They have a spear. They have throwing axes, and these are nasty throwing axes. These are tier 6 throwing axes. They do major damage, plus the aforementioned stats that we just showed you. Now with the Nord boosts, Nords continue to get stronger, and these guys are already some of the most powerful tier 5 units in the game. We unleash hell on the Legionary here. The same tough Legionary we were just saying is a really powerful unit, and it's kind of, you know, turned into the JV unit here by this very powerful shield companion. It's not a blowout, right? Those kind of battles are coming later on. Believe it or not, the Legionary are going to get completely blown out by some of these units, but the Nord Shield Companion does come out on top versus the Legionary, both in a one-on-one and also in similar tests. When I ran the cavalry test with the Valandians, the Nord Shield Companions came out on top. In fact, don't take my word for it. Let's just go ahead and do a couple of more of the tests. We're going to spend 3 to 5 minutes on each one of these units. I will try to put timestamps in afterwards. I don't always remember, so please be gentle. Now let's try an audacious challenge here, right? 348. Now, while we're uphill, this might not even be that hard. 348 Volgiers and Sergeants. And let's highlight this ability here. This is going to be a massacre. When the Nord Shield Companion is uphill, they throw their throwing axes with incredible deadly power, right? They're already very strong throwing axes, the 140 throwing skill, and I believe they have 5. They either have 4 or 5. They have a lot of throwing axes. So it's death from above, and then you get close to them, and they have better weapon speed than you. They have better overall skills, and the results are predictable. Even though the Valandians are outnumbering the Shield Companions here, they get blown off the field. Again, it's Tier 5 versus Tier 5, and there's simply no match for these powerful Nord Shield Companions. You know what? Let's do another scenario here. Let's do another very complicated mixed battle here. We'll give them sharpshooters, cavalry, and infantry, right? This should be a nightmare, especially since the cavalry, again, will be slamming us from behind. 300 against 300. How did the Shield Companions do here? In fact, basically this is saying, do you need anything besides these guys in your Nord army? Probably not, right? I think they're still going to be able to win this. Now we're going to get shot here at the outset. We will do considerable more editing later in this episode. At the beginning here, at the outset, I just kind of want to walk you through the process here. Lots of data logging, lots of recording stats, lots of direct matchups. Just like heavyweight boxers, we did quite a bit of one-on-one with some of the top units to decide which units were superior, which units got the best place. Now that wasn't the sole factor, right? Sometimes we would do the same difficult challenge with both units and then a one-on-one to determine which units were overall better. And again, these are simply one man's opinion. You can feel free to disagree and put your comments and plenty of friendly arguing down there. It doesn't hurt a thing. And you can see this mixed army of Valandians is no match. Sharpshooters, Volgiers, Sergeants, and a bunch of Knights, and they are simply destroyed. Again, another battle where it's not particularly close. Your Nord Shield Companion, very definitely number 6 on the list. Let's do one more challenge here and push the envelope a bit. This is going to be something that I'm going to repeat with several of the different units from this point out. Basically a deathmatch challenge. Can you win outnumbered by 60%, right? We'll do 500 units here, Tier 4 and Tier 5 Valandians. This should be a situation you could never win, but I think some of these troops are actually going to be able to succeed. Of course, we've done some of these tests before, so I anticipate positive results. Again, for tactics, most of the time we're just going to spread a big line, let them throw some throwing weapons, and then charge. Nothing fancy. For some of these tests, just to make sure it's empirical, we'll let the sergeants take over, and they'll do all kinds of sort of dipshittery with these units. Let's see if they can pull this out. Doesn't look like it. It's a hard battle, right? Even just killing 1-to-1 here would be good because they're so badly outnumbered. And it looks like it's breaking down. So it's actually a good baseline. The Nord Shield Companion unable to complete the deathmatch challenge against 500 Tier 4 and Tier 5 Valandians. That won't be the last time you see this challenge in today's episode. And it might be, that might be the last unit that fails to succeed at it. We shall see. Number 6, your Nord Shield Companion. Go out and get some. They're great units. All right. Well, I admit it's still my favorite infantry, and that is because it is such a hidden diamond in the rough, and that is the Battanian wildling. Probably still the best skirmisher in the game, although the Naute starts to come into the equation. The Shield Companion here versus the Wildling is a mismatch on paper, but this is an incredibly powerful unit when used correctly. I must put that line at the end of the sentence. Part of the reason that these are a diamond in the rough is that most players, or a lot of players, have never discovered the power of a Battanian Wildling. These guys have 10 javelins. The success that they're going to have is not going to be based on their armor, their weapons, their skill. It's going to be based on throwing lots of little pointy sticks. If you look in the back here, these guys have 10 javelins, and they're really good javelins too. So the AI would have been better off just setting its feet there, and they're not kiting at all, of course, the skirmishers. The AI doesn't skirmish well. You're not going to beat a Shield Companion in one-on-one hand-to-hand combat with the Wildling, and this is what a lot of players say, and they're like, the Wildlings suck. I tried them, they suck. Let me show you how to use them, fellas. And of course, plenty of the guys watching the channel, plenty of the guys watching this episode are using them, and once you discover them, it's like the first time a teenager discovers boobs. You're just loving it, right? Life is amazing. Trust me, this is going to be like the first boob you ever touched. We're just going to put them in a line uphill. That's it. I'm not going to do anything else this whole battle. All you got to do, whoops, sorry, I got carried away there with the RTS mod. We'll zip back to the action here. All we've done is given them range to throw and distance in between the guys so that everybody can throw their javelins. And they've already killed 20, 30 Shield Companions before they get to the line. Now, they'll continue to throw. We can charge here. But I think even if we held our place there and just stood still, we might at least make this battle close. And let's see how they do here. The guys in the middle are losing combat, but look at that. All we did is form a line and charge. So simply a formation change, and we blasted the Shield Companion out of the water. It's a classic example of needing to know how to use your tool. If you don't know how to use it, you're not going to have success. All right, let's get even more dynamic here and show you very basic tactics you can use with these guys just to emphasize how powerful they are. Because in reality, you shouldn't even be doing what we showed you in that last battle. You should be doing something at least a little bit more complicated. At least do a death V, and let's show you with the RTS overhead here. If you have lots of wildlings, if you have lots of skirmishers, simply make a V out of the landscape in where the center of the V is the most likely spot where the enemy is approaching. You see how it's sort of dead center of where the enemy's approaching? And again, you don't have to do anything here. In fact, you could easily call this the away from keyboard, I gotta take a leak formation. I'm just gonna leave these guys here. I'm not gonna attack at all. I'm just gonna watch the death. Literally, we're facing better infantry here, and I don't have to move a muscle. I don't have to charge. I don't have to do a thing. Now, the guys that get attacked there, they're going to get killed, but the other units are still throwing javelins, and this whole other side down by the hill here is completely untouched. And the losses are starting to mount, and the fiends, or the wildlings, are moving up, but look at the power bar. This battle's already over. All we really have to do here is to charge, and this battle would end on the spot. But, you know, I'm away from the keyboard right now. I'm just taking a leak. Whatever's left of them came over and they got tore up. I literally didn't move a single unit, and we just demolished the Shield Companions. Now let's add one more step to this just to show you how insanely diabolical these units are. You can have what is effectively perfect victories or near perfect victories. If you're facing a heavy infantry force and you have a bunch of Battanian wildlings, maybe your army is 200 troops and 100 of them are Battanian wildlings, you use this simple, very simple tactic I'm going to do here, and we're going to command, I'll get up on that hill so you can see. All you have to do is simply kite. And if you've never heard of kiting, it just means moving your units back as the enemy moves towards them. The Battanian wildlings have excellent athleticism. They move quickly on the battlefield. They're not heavily armored. That means they move quickly, and this is the origin of the original skirmishers. When the hoplites would show up, when the very powerful infantry of the ancient era would show up, very fast skirmishers would move in and they would just obliterate them because the heavily armored infantry couldn't catch up to them. They would throw a bunch of pointed sticks until all of the very tough infantry were just laying in the dirt. And that's exactly what's happening here. Now, this is at 3x speed I'm doing this, right? You should definitely be able to do this at 1x speed. And, of course, practice makes perfect. I have plenty of practice doing this. Now, the enemy's badly wounded. We'll just charge here from both flanks, and they're done, right? They're already cooked. The wildlings are not good melee units, but when the enemy's that bruised and battered, you don't have to be, right? Half the enemy were already dead, the other half were injured, and 17 losses, right? We have a 15-to-1 kill ratio with my favorite unit in Bannerlord, the Battanian wildlings. The Battanian wildlings, number 5 on today's list. All right, now I know this pick is going to disappoint some people, but this is the reality. Number 4, the Nord huscarls. Now these guys really are great units, but they're not elite. I just can't help but call them very good. Their throwing axes, very deadly, right? They throw excellently at range, but they're still throwing axes. Their spears are good, their melee is good. They have now upgraded armor, but they really lack that oomph that a lot of tier 6 have. They're not Battanian Fiend Champs. They're not Cons Guards. You can't just F1, F3 and win. And hopefully there's maybe one more little boost coming, because as good as the Nord huscarl is, it's still sort of mediocre compared to the other units. Now we did this deathmatch challenge here again versus 500 tier 4 and tier 5 Valandians. With a little bit of help of elevation here, this is a battle that I thought we could win, and indeed we ultimately pulled it out. The Nord huscarl is a very good line troop. They really don't have any weakness, but what they don't have is massive damage. Some of the units that are coming on the list afterwards have unbelievable damage compared to the Nord huscarls. And damage, of course, is king. If you're killing your enemy, you're winning. In this case, they won by the very narrowest of margin. Our first one of the units to win this challenge versus 500 Valandians. Nothing to sneeze at, and yet at the same time, wait until you see the units later on in this episode. Now again, very, very capable under these circumstances. This is against about 50% cavalry and 50% infantry. You form this same circle that works well for the legionary, and it works even better for the huscarls. In fact, you could really argue this is the formation they were made to be in. You put some shock troops in the middle, and I dare say you're almost indestructible. Everybody's armored, they all have spears. Once the melee breaks out, you have everybody charge here. Everybody's bound up so they can't move, and you know the huscarls are going to win line battles in a situation like that. So this was even more resoundingly successful than the melee battle, despite the fact that we weren't uphill and didn't have any major advantages, and we just blew the cavalry out of the water here. I think this again highlights one of the major advantages of the huscarl, and they destroy cavalry. So it's all roses. They crush cavalry, they crush infantry. What's not to love, right? Of course, you're at this stage, you're like, this is great. Well, let's show you some of their weaknesses. One of them that was unexpected for me is how badly they get whipped by Fiend Champs. Now, I tried the Sergeant first. I'm not even going to show you any of the footage. The Sergeant had absolutely no chance against the Fiend Champions. Only by dividing my divisions and sending them in at angles was I even able to make one battle of fight. And that is because the Battanian Fiend Champion not only is an outstanding archer, they're very fast. In fact, they have higher athleticism than the Nord huscarl. That is something that I'd like to see change in the future. The bottom line is that the Fiend Champion can simply run away from the huscarl, and then once they have range, they smoke them with their arrows. On top of that, there are no shrinking daisies in battle, right? The Battanian Fiend Champion is one of the best shock troops in the game, and they just also happen to be the best archer in the game. It's quite a combination. Even after the nerf, this is still a top 3 unit in Bannerlord. So we played it out here. I also learned early on, you don't even want to use your throwing weapons because your units slow down when they throw them. You have no chance to close at that stage. And you could see what's going on here, right? We are heavily kited. The death spam starts as the Fiend Champs set their feet, start smoking your units. And every single time we caught up to them and got a few kills, they started kiting some more. It's quite a daunting task. Of course, the Nords don't have cavalry. Ordinarily, the solution to this kind of a problem would be cavalry. If you're in this kind of a pickle, you're really just kind of fucked because they cannot chase the Fiend Champions down. Eventually, they got a few kills, but you can see even in ultra fast speed here, they really do look like a guy chasing around a gal at school that has no interest in dating him. And just like the dude defeat, right? They get crushed here by the Fiend Champions. They crushing all our hopes, man. Damn those Fiend Champions. Here's another weakness they have as well. To higher DPS units, for example, the Battanian veteran falxman. This is one of the most lethal units in the game. In fact, they're coming up on the list. They have a long falx and they know how to use it, right? This is the guy that she said not to worry about, and they're a problem for the huscarls. The bottom line is they do a lot more damage. They weren't one-shotting huscarls. I even played around a little bit with the RTS mod and took them over, but consistently two-shotting the huscarls, and they swing their long falx very fast. So all you see is shields rolling downhill, and ultimately the falxmen were able to make the huscarls rout. This is a tier 5 infantryman defeating a tier 6 huscarl. It's a little bit of a problem. Between archers and shock troops, the huscarls do have some weaknesses. Alright, so one last battle here for the huscarls, showing their prowess in battle. We'll have them fight their tier 5 brethren here, the shield companion, and we're outnumbered by 90, so 30%, and see if they can pull off this challenge. And where do we come out altogether with the huscarls? Well, they're outstanding versus cavalry, and they're really good infantry troops. They're very, very solid in a line, but I think compared to the other tier 6 throughout the game, they're lacking a little bit. And again, on the unlikely chance that Tail Worlds is listening, I would say boost their athleticism, maybe even 200, 220. Make them the fastest infantry in the game. These guys are elite athletes after all. All right, so really good against infantry, really, really good against cavalry, not so good against archers, and destroyed by powerful DPS units. All right, so speaking of powerful DPS units, here they are, right? This is the greatest axe-throwing group of infantrymen in the history of the game. Now, in reality, they're not terrible skirmishers, the Battanian veteran falxmen. Now, they have 8 throwing axes. They got a big upgrade in the last patch to 1.3. Not only were they given the long falx, a more deadly shock weapon, but they were given an extra bag of throwing axes, so they do real damage now at range, and they're reasonably decent skirmishers. That said, these guys kill with their samurai sword. In they go. The sword is gigantic. It looms up over the enemy here. It's very, very fast, and most enemies get 2-shot. Either 1-shot from the headshot or a 2-shot, and the enemy's basically overwhelmed. They don't know how to deal with them. In this matchup here versus the very solid tier 5 shield companion, you'll remember, of course, they were number 6 on the list. They get absolutely decimated here by our samurai, our Battanian samurai swordman. A 10-to-1 kill ratio against an elite tier 5 unit. It's hard to emphasize how elite that is. All right. Now let's do a battle here against the huscarls. They can't beat the tier 6 huscarls in combat. Well, of course, spoiler, you already saw this from the other side. As the huscarls, we tried to challenge the Battanian veteran falxman and lost, even though it was close. In charge with a little tiny bit of micro holding fire. And that's a key. You always want to let your guys skirmish and then have everybody attack and hold fire. You don't want them wasting their time with their axes while the rest of their mates are fighting. And we don't just beat the huscarls here. These guys crush the huscarls, right? Half of their forces are left against supposedly the best infantry in the game. Now, it's not just me. This is the AI bumbling about. They basically tried to skirmish the aforementioned throwing axes. The AI kind of fell in love with them, and while the rest of the troops are flinging throwing axes from the very back, they sort of sent their troops up on a conveyor belt 10 at a time to die, and the results weren't great. But just like a shy kid with a huge dick, It took them a little while to figure out what they had before they finally charged with all their forces, and once they did, it was just a total massacre. They just plowed right through the huscarls. Again, this is the AI using both sides here, and the huscarls lose to the tier 5 Battanian veteran falxman. What more is there to say than that, right? That's pretty obvious. Now, I had to do the deathmatch challenge. I've mentioned it a few times. This is 500 Battanian, Valandian tier 4 and tier 5 units against our 300 Battanian veteran falxman. And cover your children's eyes. This is going to be an ugly massacre, as in go our samurai knights. In this situation, I didn't even hold fire. I just let them fling their little axes. We didn't need them. They just blew everything off the battlefield. It's kind of sickening how powerful this force is. This is 300 units just destroying 500, and they made it look easy. Again, more than half of their forces are alive. I think this is one of the absolutely most OP units in Bannerlord. All right, now weaknesses, right? As we have one more battle here. In fact, what we'll do is we'll just do the most simple battle possible. What I'll do for this final example is we will simply charge and hold fire, and I won't do any micromanagement at all, right? 300 against 300. To wrap up, to summarize, we know their weaknesses, right? They're clearly going to be weak to skirmishers, archers, even cavalry. In fact, they're sort of a one-trick pony. Now, if you protect them, they will destroy cavalry. That's something for our tactics videos to talk about at a later date. But hand to hand, these units are virtually unstoppable. There's virtually no unit in the game that can defeat these guys. They're absolute beasts, but I didn't say no unit could beat them. Now, coming in at number 2 is probably also going to surprise a lot of people, but not us on the channel, not me either. These units are outstanding. In our long Aserai campaign, I really got to explore and love these guys. The Aserai Veteran Infantry. These guys are amazingly versatile units, but on top of that, they do really well against other infantry in line battle. Here, our first example, we have them butchering the Imperial legionary, supposedly one of the very best infantry in the game, and it's no contest. Now again, feel free to test these results on your own, but I ran 30 tests with the Aserai veteran infantry, and it was amazing how many they won. Of course, we will summarize in the next handful of minutes here, but look at this. Imperial legionary just cast aside like they're a bunch of looters. Now, other top tier infantry, no problem. Here we go against the Nord huscarl. What are they? Oh, they're just tier 6 infantry? No problem. The Aserai veteran infantry has the medicine for what ails us. Now, to be sure, micromanagement helps. If you could put them at range with their javelins, I mean, listen to that sound. It's almost sexual. The sound of the NORDS shields trying to absorb all those javelins, but you know a lot of those shields are breaking, and once they hit line-to-line combat, despite inferior stats, the Aserai veteran infantry win. Now, this was really surprising to me, but I ran this 3 times, and as long as I had that wide formation at the beginning, the Aserai veteran infantry won every single time. Want more evidence? Good, because we're going to produce it for you. They also had no problem in sergeant mode. In other words, when I put the AI in charge of both the Aserai veteran infantry and the Nord huscarl, guess who won? The Aserai veteran infantry. Now, it was strange battles. The AI tends to do odd things with their infantry. Here they had them in a very tight phalanx, and the Nord huscarls weren't quite sure what to make of them. The Aserai veteran infantry were kind of losing in the early stages, and I've sped this up significantly for you. But whatever happened late in this battle, all of a sudden it swung dramatically in the Aserai veteran infantry's favor, and only 1 out of 5 battles did they lose to the Nord huscarls. I think that's pretty definitive. At the end of each battle, there would be a huge flush, and the next thing you know, you would see Nords running off the edge of the battlefield. I can't really explain it because they don't have superior weapon skill or something like that, but again, the results were the same over and over again. One last piece of evidence here against the huscarls. How about just a straight charge, right? I'm not going to do anything except for play as the sergeant and charge F1, F3 against huscarls, and who do you think won? Well, you guys already know the answer because I'm showing it to you. And my commander here was issuing insolent commands to me while I run a YouTube channel. This guy, he's just thinks he's in charge or some shit. But surprise, surprise, the huscarls got chased off the battlefield in a remarkable amount of different battles. The Aserai veteran infantry beasted other infantry division in in line combat, including the veteran falxman. Now, it did help, of course, that they softened them at the beginning with their javelins. How about mixed armies? This battle shocked me as well, and I ran it 3 times. This was the most dramatic, but it still illustrates the point. I did the same circle defense that we did with the Nords earlier against a mixed force. This is 300 tough Imperials, and we gave them cavalry, crossbow, archers, elite cataphract. We even gave them the tier 6 elite cataphract, and our Aserai veteran infantry held out their circle like it was the Alamo. The cavalry charges had very little damage. Of course, the Aserai veteran infantry have all of the tricks of the trade. They have javelins, they kill at range. They have good spears that are anti-cavalry. They have good stats to fight the legionary hand-to-hand. And look at this result. This is against a mixed army where I did virtually no tactics. I just formed a big donut and then F1, F3. And the enemy's blown off the battlefield. Out of the way, Imperials. We've got the solution for you. We don't even have to think hard about it. We just send in our Aserai veteran infantry. All right, so let's put the cherry on top to the Aserai veteran infantry. They were also the only infantry that I was able to defeat the Fiends. Now, maybe we used superior tactics, and maybe it was an aberration. I only ran this test once by bracketing the Fiends in, by basically sending in our infantry lines at opposites. The AI had a hard time kiting here, and once our units were within range, skirmishers destroy archers, especially because the Fiend champs here were doing kind of the heebie-jeebies. Don't take this as empirical, but it still was the only infantry to be able to destroy the Fiend champs, and I think it's not an aberration. I think very few other troops in the game could have done this. They were able to chase them down and finish off the Fiend champs, and I think collectively that really is sort of the cherry on top. The Aserai veteran infantry. Strengths? Lots of strengths, right? Incredibly versatile, very capable melee men, strong javelins, excellent against cavalry. Weaknesses? Well, they're not the guys that you're about to see now. The most ominous force in Calradia is this offensive weapon. Fortunately for you fellas that are enjoying the Nords and the DLC, number 1 on the list is the Nord skaldbrestir. These guys are absolutely the stuff of nightmares. Now, naturally, we had to test them against the Aserai veteran infantry just because the number 2 contender was raising their hand saying, well, we might be better, right? And the early stages of this kind of a battle is somewhat close, and that is because the skaldbrestir's main weakness is to ranged weapons. They don't have a shield. However, they have excellent throwing axes, but when they close to melee range with their incredibly fast axe, it resembles a war crime as they cut their enemy to pieces. Now we're going to overlay a palace guard here with a skaldbrestir and look at the difference between the axes that these two different units have. It's literally night and day. It doesn't matter what variant you use. It's a much, much better axe, and it's reflected on the battlefield. On top of that, they have very good armor. Their helmet especially is very high-end, their chest piece is solid, and their gloves are good as well. Only their boots are lacking. Now, we also had to test them against the other best shock troop in the game. Now, they have better throwing axes than the veteran falxman on top of better overall axes. Even though the falxmen have a faster weapon, in combat the falxmen do better, but the throwing axes and the lethalness of this axe put the skaldbrestirs over the top. Now, if you hold fire, you do lose this battle, right? They did benefit from their throwing axes. The veteran falxman is no joke. All right, hide the women and children. We're going to do a few more decimating test results here, and let's start off with a theoretically close matchup, the Sturgeon Heroic Linebreakers, and let's give the Heroic Linebreakers 30% more troops. They should be able to win here. They get decimated at range by the skaldbrestirs, and then of course once it turns into melee, it's an absolute slaughter. It looks like a horror movie. The Linebreakers don't just lose, they get obliterated. Now let's move on to the strongest theoretical infantry in the game, the Nord huscarl. A little bit of range skirmishing first forces the huscarls into a shield, and then the axes come up, and it's just absolutely good night. Again, this is the tier 5 Nord unit against the best infantry in the game, the only tier 6 infantry in the game, and look at that death spam. It's rather breathtaking. Now, admittedly, this is with me in control. You have advantages over the AI if you know what you're doing. By dumping in throwing axes, The enemy is forced into a shield wall, which actually benefits your kingdom, as all the Nord huscarl shields roll away here. But let's put the shoe on the other foot. Could I win with the huscarls against the skaldbrestir? And the answer is no. I tried this 4 different times. If you break your formations up and have a square and do complex tactics, you have a shot. But just one-on-one against this tier 5 skaldbrestir, you can't do enough damage at range. They throw back enough axes to make that a bit of a toss-up, but once they close to melee, our Nord huscarls here are just no match. The big axes come out, and the death spam is astonishing, right? This is me controlling a tier 5 unit against a tier 6 unit against the tier 5 beastly skaldbrestir, and it just is not a good result for the huscarls here. Again, maybe one more piece of evidence that the huscarls could use a boost. It's also evidence that the skaldbrestir is something of a god of war. All right, we had to test this out because we talked about it earlier in the episode. What happens with the palace guards here? In fact, let's hold fire so we don't kill hundreds of them at range. What happens with the palace guards against the skaldbrestir axe on axe, right? The palace guards were sort of the best axemen before the introduction of the skaldbrestir, and here I'm just making them engage us in combat. Once we charge, it's all over. And of course, this was a foregone conclusion once you know the weapon speed, the weapon damage, the weapon length. It's superior in every category: weapon length, weapon speed, handling, everything, and the results are predictable. It's kind of amazing that they've turned the palace guards into a weak militia-like bitch compared to the skaldbrestir. Okay, now I was absolutely possessed here trying to win with the Nord huscarl against the skaldbrestir. I'm like, we will fucking win somehow. So we did all sorts of elaborate tactics. I tried different things, kiting. I tried distractionary tactics. Here we got a really nice V-shaped formation, and our units plowing downhill against the skaldbrestir, and this was the only battle that I won with the Nord huscarls in about 8 or 9 attempts against the skaldbrestir. Some of them were AI controlled, but several of these were I micromanaged. This was the only attempt where we were able to win, and just barely, right? It wasn't a blowout. Again, we have the best tier 5 units, best tier 6 infantry in the game, and this was the only time we won against these beastly units. The best infantry in the game? Absolutely. All right, another test here. How about when we're outnumbered? We have been trying this deathmatch throughout this episode, and let's try it with this unit here. And I really do hope the women and children are hidden, because you're about to witness a battlefield massacre. Not only do they do really well at range, of course, the Valandians in these examples don't really have a lot of throwing weapons, but once they close, it's like a travesty of war. You just never see a death spam like that on a battlefield unless you're fighting peasants. And these are tier 4 and tier 5 Valandian units. I mean, we're talking Volgiers and sergeants just ending up carcasses on the battlefield. And you could follow the trail almost like Hansel and Gretel straight to the source of all this destruction. Easily the most powerful tier 5 unit, and arguably the most overall powerful infantry unit in the game, the Nord skaldbrestir. Advantages? Everything. Basically, they kill everything hand to hand. Disadvantages, you need to be careful against archers, against skirmishers, against spear cavalry. Now, we will talk about that in future episodes. I'm going to give you guys the key. The ultimate weapon of destruction, I think, is going to be shield and shock with the Nord skaldbrestir. That will entail you going out and recruiting some cavalry. I think that'll be the numero uno key to success with them. However, I think you'll do just fine if you have a lot of Nord huscarls and behind them a bunch of skaldbrestirs, right? Block the arrows and then move in for the kill with your skaldbrestir. All right, now I wanted to include all of these tests at the very end here because I knew there were going to be some people that said, what about dismounted cavalry? What about dismounted elite tier 6 cavalry? So we'll start here with the Imperial elite cataphract, 300 of them against the skaldbrestir. It's not pretty. They got butchered something fierce. We'll try Fiend Champs. Now, of course, we did hold fire until the enemy was up close. Obviously, Fiend Champions will shoot skaldbrestir to pieces at range, but up close, no contest. How about Drudzinic champions, right? Very, very tough, stout infantry. A lot of guys say these guys are sort of the original dragoons, cavalry that are supposed to be ridden to a certain position, dismounted, and then fuck the enemy up on foot. Well, they got beat too. Basically, the skaldbrestir passed every single test. The only unit that was even able to push them in one of the tests was the Kongsguard. They won 1 out of 4 of these battles. Most of the battles, though, the Kongsguards got their shit pushed in something fierce. Again, we're holding fire with the Kongsguards. All right, more tests to come. We are going to test archers. We are going to test the Sky Gods Chosen. Where do they place amongst the ranks of archers in Calradia? How do you use the different units here as we get hit right between the eyes with this throwing axe? How do you use the skaldbrestirs, right? Stay tuned, friends. We're going to cover all that. Please subscribe if you want to see more from our channel. Hit that like button on the way out. And I will see you, friends, next time.